The silence of the intensive care unit was shattered by a gentle lullaby echoing through the sterile corridors. In room 312, an 8-year-old boy opened his eyes for the first time in 4 months and whispered a name that would change everything forever. But it wasn't his millionaire father's name he called out as tears streamed down the man's face. It was the name of a humble night shift cleaner whom everyone had overlooked, yet who had been singing to him every single night when no one else was watching. In the heart of Manhattan, where glass towers pierce the sky and dreams are built on ambition, two worlds existed in parallel, rarely intersecting until fate decided otherwise. The prestigious Manhattan General Hospital stood as a beacon of medical excellence, its marble floors polished to perfection and its reputation built on serving the city's elite. Yet within its walls, unsung heroes worked tirelessly through the night, invisible to most but essential to the healing that took place there. Grace Williams had been cleaning these halls for 7 years, always arriving at 11 p.m. sharp for her overnight shift. At 45, she carried herself with quiet dignity despite the weight of countless hardships. Her graying hair was always pulled back in a neat bun, and her warm brown eyes held depths of compassion that few ever took the time to notice. Grace possessed an extraordinary gift that she herself had never fully recognized, an eidetic memory for music and sound patterns. She could remember every lullaby her grandmother had sung to her 50 years ago, could recall the exact pitch and rhythm of any melody she'd ever heard, and had an uncanny ability to sense what songs would bring comfort to troubled souls. Grace worked the night shift not by choice, but by necessity. During the day, she cared for her elderly mother, Sarah, who suffered from advanced dementia and required constant supervision. Every dollar Grace earned went toward her mother's medical bills and the small apartment they shared in Queens. Despite the challenges, Grace never complained. She found purpose in her work, believing that even the humblest service could be an act of love when performed with the right heart. Her routine was methodical but never mechanical. She would begin on the pediatric ward, then move through the surgical units, and finally end her shift in the intensive care unit. What nobody knew was that Grace had developed a secret ritual over the years. She would softly hum or whisper lullabies as she worked, especially in the rooms where patients lay unconscious or in pain. She believed, deep in her heart, that music could reach places where medicine sometimes couldn't. On the 57th floor of a gleaming corporate tower just 12 blocks away, Robert Sterling sat in his executive office, staring out at the city lights that seemed to mock his inner darkness. At 42, he was one of Manhattan's most successful real estate moguls, having built an empire worth over $3 billion. But success had come at a devastating cost. 2 years ago, he had lost his wife, Catherine, in a car accident that had also left their 8-year-old son, Jamie, with severe brain trauma. Robert had once been a different man, warm, generous, involved in his community. He and Catherine had been high school sweethearts who built their fortune together while never losing sight of their values. They were known for their charitable work and their dedication to their son. But Catherine's death had transformed Robert into someone even he didn't recognize. He had become cold, controlling, and consumed by work as a way to avoid dealing with his grief and the overwhelming responsibility of caring for a severely injured child. Jamie Sterling had been the light of his parents' lives, a precocious boy with his mother's gentle spirit and his father's sharp intelligence. He loved music above all else, spending hours at the piano his mother had taught him to play. After the accident, Jamie had slipped into a coma that the doctors said could be permanent. The boy who once filled their home with laughter and melodies now lay silent in a hospital bed, surrounded by machines that breathed for him and monitored his fading vitals. Dr. Margaret Foster, the hospital's chief of neurology, was a brilliant but increasingly frustrated physician. At 58, she had dedicated her life to understanding the mysteries of the human brain, but Jamie's case haunted her. She had tried every conventional treatment, consulted with specialists around the world, but nothing seemed to reach the boy trapped inside his damaged mind. What made it worse was watching Robert Sterling's gradual transformation from a grieving father into a bitter, demanding presence who questioned every decision and showed little patience for anyone he deemed beneath his social status. Robert's arrogance had grown with his pain. He donated millions to the hospital, which gave him influence he wielded like a weapon. He demanded the best doctors, the most expensive treatments, and complete control over every aspect of Jamie's care. But beneath his commanding exterior was a man drowning in guilt and desperation, lashing out at the world because he couldn't save the one person who mattered most. The hospital staff had learned to avoid Robert Sterling when possible. He was known for his cutting remarks to nurses, his unreasonable demands, and his condescending attitude toward anyone he saw as hired help. He had fired 3 nursing teams and 2 specialists who had dared to suggest that Jamie might benefit from alternative therapies or a more hopeful environment. It was into this world of clinical precision and emotional devastation that Grace Williams unknowingly stepped each night, her humble service creating ripples and waters she never imagined she could disturb. She had noticed the boy in room 312 during her first week on the ICU rotation, so young, so still, with machines breathing for him while his father sat rigid in a chair nearby, staring at his phone or pacing the halls making business calls even at 2 in the morning. Grace's heart broke for both the child and the father, though she never would have presumed to intrude on their grief. She simply did her job with extra care, ensuring that Jamie's room was not just clean but peaceful, that the harsh hospital lighting was dimmed when she worked, and that her movements were gentle enough not to disturb either patient or parent. And always, as she had done in every room for 7 years, she hummed softly while she worked, old lullabies her grandmother had sung, hymns from her childhood church, gentle melodies that seemed to flow from some deep well of compassion within her. What Grace didn't know was that her voice, floating through the quiet night hours, had become the only sound that seemed to calm Jamie's vital signs. The monitors would show subtle improvements during her 30-minute cleaning routine, his heart rate would stabilize, his blood pressure would normalize, and the concerning spikes in his brain activity would smooth into more peaceful patterns. Dr. Foster had noticed these changes in the overnight reports, but attributed them to natural fluctuations in the boy's condition. Now make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss these incredible stories of human kindness and unexpected miracles. It was on a particularly difficult Tuesday night that the first crack appeared in the wall Robert Sterling had built around his heart. He had been sitting beside Jamie's bed for 18 hours straight, having just returned from a business trip to Los Angeles. The trip had been a disaster. A major development deal had fallen through, costing his company millions, and he had snapped at his assistant so viciously that she had quit via email before he even landed back in New York. Robert was exhausted, running on coffee and fury, when Grace quietly entered the room at her usual 2 a.m. time slot. She paused when she saw that he was awake, offering a respectful nod. "I can come back later if you prefer, sir," she said softly, her voice carrying the gentle authority of someone who had learned to navigate difficult situations with grace. "No, do whatever you need to do," Robert replied curtly, not even looking up from his laptop. "Just try to be quiet about it." Grace began her careful work, moving around the room with the practiced efficiency of years of experience. She dusted the medical equipment, replaced the flowers that various business associates had sent, and gently cleaned around Jamie's bed. As always, she found herself humming, this time, a lullaby her own mother had sung to her decades ago, "Golden slumbers kiss your eyes, smiles await you when you rise." The effect was immediate and unmistakable. Jamie's heart monitor, which had been showing irregular patterns all evening, suddenly steadied. His breathing, assisted by the ventilator, became deeper and more rhythmic. Most remarkably, for the first time in months, his facial muscles relaxed completely, giving him the peaceful expression of a child in natural sleep rather than the tense mask of medical unconsciousness. Robert looked up from his laptop, startled by the change in the room's atmosphere. He stared at his son's face, then at the cleaning woman who continued her work while singing softly. For a moment, he felt something he hadn't experienced since Catherine's death, a flicker of peace, a sense that perhaps all was not lost. But the moment passed quickly, buried under layers of grief-hardened skepticism. Robert convinced himself it was coincidence, that his exhausted mind was seeing patterns that weren't there. When Grace finished her work and left with another polite nod, he returned to his laptop, determined to push the incident from his mind. However, as the nights passed, the pattern became undeniable. Grace's presence brought a calm to Jamie that no medical intervention had achieved. Dr. Foster began to take notice of the overnight improvements in Jamie's condition, but when she mentioned them to Robert during their weekly consultation, he dismissed them irritably. "Dr. Foster, I'm paying for medical science, not wishful thinking," he said coldly. "If you can't explain these improvements with hard data, then they're probably not improvements at all." Dr. Foster, who had been growing increasingly concerned about Robert's hostile attitude toward the staff, decided to investigate further. She began reviewing the security footage from Jamie's room, looking for any correlation between the timing of these mysterious improvements and external factors. What she discovered surprised her. Every single positive change in Jamie's condition coincided exactly with Grace Williams' cleaning schedule. Armed with this information, Dr. Foster approached Robert with a proposal that would test both his desperation and his prejudices. "Mr. Sterling, I believe I've identified a factor that's been helping Jamie's recovery. It's unconventional, But the data is clear. What kind of factor? Robert asked, his attention finally fully engaged. Music therapy. Specifically, the lullabies sung by one of our night shift cleaning staff. Your son responds dramatically to her voice. Robert's reaction was swift and brutal. Are you seriously suggesting that my son's recovery depends on some janitor singing to him? Dr. Foster, I expected better from someone of your reputation. I pay this hospital a fortune for cutting-edge medical care, not folk remedies from the cleaning staff. But Dr. Foster had seen too much in her career to be intimidated by wealth or anger. Mr. Sterling, medicine isn't always about what we expect or what makes us comfortable. Sometimes healing comes from unexpected sources. I'm simply reporting what the data shows. Then fix the data, Robert snapped. Find a real explanation, one that doesn't involve treating my son like a charity case being entertained by the help. His words revealed the depth of his prejudice and pain. To Robert, accepting that Grace's humble service could help Jamie felt like an admission of his own failure as a father and provider. If a minimum wage employee could reach his son when his millions couldn't, what did that say about the value system he had built his life around? Dr. Foster left that meeting deeply troubled. She had seen families destroyed by tragedy before, but Robert Sterling's combination of grief and arrogance was creating a toxic environment that could ultimately harm his son's chances of recovery. She made a decision that would prove to be the catalyst for everything that followed. She would continue to monitor the correlation between Grace's presence and Jamie's improvement, building an undeniable case that even Robert's stubborn pride couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, Grace remained unaware of the impact she was having. She continued her nightly routine, singing to a boy who couldn't respond, offering comfort to a child whose father barely acknowledged her existence. Her only motivation was the simple belief that everyone deserved to be cared for with dignity and love, regardless of their ability to reciprocate or reward that care. But Robert's awareness of Grace began to change. He started timing his presence in Jamie's room to coincide with her cleaning schedule, initially telling himself it was to monitor what this janitor was doing to his son. He began to listen more carefully to her songs, recognizing some as classics he remembered Catherine humming years ago. Despite his determination to remain objective and skeptical, he found himself looking forward to those brief 30-minute interludes when the harsh reality of his situation was softened by Grace's gentle presence. The breaking point came 3 weeks later, on a night when Robert's carefully constructed emotional walls finally began to crumble. He had just received news that another business deal had collapsed, this one potentially threatening his company's stability. He was on the phone, speaking harshly to his lawyers, when Grace entered the room. "I need you to figure this out tonight," he was saying, his voice rising with barely contained rage. "I don't care who you have to call or how much it costs. This company is all I have left, and I won't let some bureaucrats in planning and zoning destroy what I've built." Grace paused at the threshold, instinctively sensing the emotional storm in the room. She had learned over the years to read the moods of grieving families, to adjust her presence accordingly. But something about this man's pain called to her maternal instincts, reminding her of her own moments of desperation when caring for her mother. As Robert continued his phone conversation, becoming increasingly agitated, Grace began her work with unusual care. She moved even more quietly than usual, her actions creating a sense of calm purposefulness in the room. And then, perhaps responding to the tangible pain she felt emanating from both father and son, she began to sing, not hum, but actually sing in her clear, untrained but naturally beautiful voice. The song was one her grandmother had taught her, an old spiritual about finding peace in the midst of storms. "Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, a long way from home. But then I remember, I'm never alone, there's always someone who cares." The effect on Robert was immediate and overwhelming. The words hit him like a physical blow, forcing him to confront emotions he had been suppressing for 2 years. His phone conversation faltered, then stopped entirely as he found himself unable to speak. For the first time since Catherine's death, Robert Sterling began to cry, not the angry tears of frustration he had shed in private, but deep, healing sobs that came from the very core of his grief. Grace continued singing, pretending not to notice his breakdown but allowing her voice to carry all the comfort and understanding she had learned to give to those who suffered. She had witnessed this kind of cathartic release before in other rooms, with other families, and she understood that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was to provide a safe space for pain to be acknowledged and released. When her song ended and Robert had regained some composure, he did something that surprised them both. He looked directly at her, really seeing her for the first time, and said, "Thank you. Thank you." Grace met his eyes with gentle understanding. "You're welcome, sir. Your boy is lucky to have a father who loves him so much." It was a simple statement, but it carried profound implications. Grace saw love where Robert saw only failure, dedication where he saw inadequacy, hope where he saw despair. Her words planted a seed that would grow in the days to come, forcing Robert to reconsider not just his treatment of Grace, but his understanding of what it meant to truly care for his son. However, this moment of connection was about to be tested by the arrival of someone whose arrogance would make Robert's previous behavior seem mild by comparison. Dr. Harrison Blake, the hospital's new director of operations, had been hired specifically to streamline efficiency and eliminate unnecessary elements from a hospital's operations. He was a man who saw everything in terms of profit margins and cost-benefit analyses, and he had Grace Williams directly in his sights. Dr. Blake had been reviewing the hospital's employment records and had decided that the night shift cleaning crew was overstaffed and overpaid. He was particularly focused on Grace, whose 7-year tenure meant she was earning significantly more than newer hires. In his view, cleaning was cleaning, and there was no justification for paying premium wages for what he saw as unskilled labor. The confrontation came on a Thursday night, just as Grace was beginning her shift in the ICU. Dr. Blake, accompanied by 2 security guards, intercepted her in the hallway outside Jamie's room. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice carrying the cold authority of someone who enjoyed wielding power over others. "I need to speak with you about your employment here." Grace, sensing trouble but maintaining her composure, replied calmly, "Of course, Dr. Blake. How can I help you?" "It's come to my attention that you've been engaging in unauthorized activities during your shift. Specifically, singing and spending excessive time in patient rooms beyond what's necessary for your cleaning duties." Grace felt her heart sink. She had always been careful to complete her work efficiently, never neglecting her duties, but she realized that her small acts of kindness had been noticed and misinterpreted. "I always complete all my assigned tasks, sir. I would never compromise the quality of my work." "That's not the issue," Dr. Blake continued, clearly relishing his position of power. "The issue is that you're being paid to clean, not to entertain. This hospital runs on efficiency and professional boundaries. Your singing is a disruption to the medical environment, and frankly, it's inappropriate for someone in your position to presume to provide comfort to patients and their families." The cruelty of his words hung in the air. Dr. Blake was essentially arguing that Grace's compassion was a liability, that her care for others was somehow unprofessional. It was an attack not just on her actions, but on the very qualities that made her who she was. "Furthermore," Dr. Blake added, "effective immediately, you're being transferred to the day shift in the general maintenance department. Your interaction with patients and families will be limited, and any singing or unauthorized communication will result in immediate termination." Grace stood in stunned silence, processing what this meant. The day shift would make it impossible for her to care for her mother. The maintenance department was a significant demotion, with reduced pay and no opportunity for the small acts of service that had given her work meaning. Essentially, Dr. Blake was destroying her livelihood as punishment for the crime of caring too much. What made the situation even more heartbreaking was that Robert Sterling witnessed the entire confrontation from Jamie's doorway. For the first time, he saw Grace not as the help, but as a dedicated professional being humiliated and punished for showing kindness to his son. The irony was overwhelming. Here was a man whose arrogance dwarfed even Robert's previous behavior, attacking the one person who had brought any peace to Jamie's condition. Robert found himself at a crossroads that would define not just his character, but his son's future. He could remain silent, protecting his own comfort and maintaining his social distance from Grace's problems. Or he could finally act on the growing realization that this humble woman had given his family something precious: hope, comfort, and unconditional care, without asking for anything in return. The choice he made in that moment would determine whether his son would continue to receive the mysterious healing power of Grace's voice, or whether Dr. Blake's cold efficiency would rob Jamie of the one thing that seemed to reach him in his silent world. Make sure to hit that like button if you're hoping Robert finds the courage to stand up for what's right. The tension in the sterile hospital corridor was palpable as Dr. Blake waited for Grace's response to his cruel ultimatum. Grace stood quietly, her hands folded, processing the devastating blow to her livelihood and her ability to care for both her mother and the patients who had unknowingly become her extended family. The security guards flanked Dr. Blake like enforcers, their presence meant to intimidate and ensure compliance. Robert Sterling watched from Jamie's doorway, his mind racing through a calculation that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the man he was choosing to become. For 2 years, he had used his wealth and influence as weapons, bulldozing through obstacles and demanding that the world bend to his will. Now he faced a moment that would define not just his character, but possibly his son's future. "Dr. Blake," Robert's voice cut through the tense silence, causing everyone to turn toward him. His tone carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful people, but there was something new in it, a moral certainty that went beyond mere wealth or position. "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Blake replied, clearly surprised but attempting to maintain his condescending demeanor. "This doesn't concern you. This is a personnel matter involving one of our cleaning staff." "Actually, it concerns me very much," Robert said, stepping fully into the hallway. "You see, you're talking about removing the one person who has had any positive impact on my son's condition. And frankly, Dr. Blake, your ignorance is showing." Dr. Blake's face flushed with anger at being challenged, especially in front of his security team and a member of the cleaning staff. "Mr. Sterling, I understand you're emotionally invested in your son's care, but you can't possibly understand the operational complexities of running a hospital. This woman's activities are unprofessional and disruptive." It was then that Robert Sterling revealed the secret skill that had made him one of Manhattan's most successful real estate moguls, an eidetic memory for patterns, details, and data that allowed him to see connections others missed. He had been unconsciously cataloging every detail of Jamie's condition, every fluctuation in his vital signs, every correlation between his son's responses and external factors. "Let me share some operational data with you, Dr. Blake," Robert said, his voice taking on the sharp edge of a man who had just realized he held all the winning cards. "Over the past 6 weeks, my son's heart rate has stabilized exactly 37 times. Each incident occurred between 2:15 and 2:45 a.m. His blood pressure normalized on 42 occasions, all during the same time window. His brain activity showed measurable improvement 61 times, again, all during Grace's cleaning schedule." Dr. Blake shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting such specific data from a grieving father. "Those are normal fluctuations in any coma patients." "I'm not finished," Robert interrupted, his voice growing stronger. "I've also documented that on the 3 nights when Grace was absent due to family obligations, Jamie's vital signs remained erratic throughout the night shift. When she returned, the improvements resumed immediately. Would you like me to provide you with the exact times, dates, and corresponding medical readings?" Grace stared at Robert in amazement. She had no idea he had been paying such careful attention to her schedule, much less correlating it with Jamie's condition. The revelation that her simple acts of caring had been having measurable medical benefits was overwhelming. Dr. Blake, realizing he was losing control of the situation, attempted to reassert his authority. "Mr. Sterling, even if there's some correlation, we can't base medical decisions on the whims of untrained personnel. There are proper protocols." "The only protocol I care about," Robert said, his voice now carrying the full weight of his influence and determination, "is the one that helps my son. And if Grace Williams is helping him, then she continues exactly what she's been doing." But Dr. Blake had built his career on bullying subordinates and asserting bureaucratic power over those who couldn't fight back. He made the crucial mistake of underestimating both Robert's resolve and Grace's quiet strength. "Mr. Sterling, you may be a significant donor to this hospital, but you don't dictate staffing decisions. This woman will follow hospital policy, or she'll find employment elsewhere. And frankly, given her limited education and skill set, I doubt she'd find comparable work anywhere else in the city." The cruelty of Dr. Blake's words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. He had just threatened Grace's livelihood while simultaneously insulting her worth as a human being, all in the name of corporate efficiency. It was the kind of casual cruelty that revealed a profound moral emptiness, the reduction of human dignity to line items on a balance sheet. What Dr. Blake didn't know was that his attack on Grace had just triggered something in Robert Sterling that went beyond paternal instinct or business calculation. For the first time since Catherine's death, Robert felt the surge of righteous anger that comes from witnessing injustice and having the power to stop it. "Dr. Blake," Robert said, his voice now dangerously quiet, "you've just made a very serious mistake. You see, while you've been focused on your cost-benefit analyses and efficiency reports, I've been making some calls of my own." Robert pulled out his phone and dialed a number from memory. "David? It's Robert Sterling. Yes, I know it's late. I need you to pull the file on our hospital donations and the board positions that come with them." "Yes, The Manhattan General File. Dr. Blake's confident demeanor began to crack as he realized Robert wasn't just another grieving parent making empty threats. The Sterling Foundation was one of Manhattan General's largest donors, and Robert's contributions over the past 5 years had given him significant influence with the board of directors. Dr. Blake, Robert continued, still holding his phone, let me explain something about hospital administration that they apparently didn't teach you in business school. Major donors don't just write checks, they get board positions, voting rights, and the ability to influence administrative decisions. Especially when those decisions affect the quality of patient care. Grace watched in stunned silence as this powerful man went to war on her behalf. She had spent her entire adult life being invisible, being overlooked, being treated as if her contributions didn't matter. Now she was witnessing someone with the power to change things, choosing to use that power not for personal gain, but to protect her right to serve others with dignity. Furthermore, Robert said, his tactical mind now fully engaged, I think the board would be very interested to learn about your plans to eliminate the very therapeutic intervention that's been helping their major donor's son recover from a coma. They might wonder about your medical credentials, your understanding of patient care, and your fitness to make decisions that affect people's lives. Dr. Blake, realizing his position was becoming untenable, made one final attempt to maintain control. This is highly irregular, Mr. Sterling. You can't possibly expect the hospital to. He never got to finish his sentence. At that moment, alarms began blaring from Jamie's room. The heart monitor was showing dramatic spikes, and the boy's vital signs were fluctuating wildly. Dr. Foster came running, followed by a team of nurses, and they quickly surrounded Jamie's bed. What happened? Dr. Foster asked, checking the monitors and examining Jamie's responses. We were just having a discussion in the hallway, Robert said, suddenly terrified that the confrontation had somehow affected his son. Dr. Foster frowned at the readings. His stress indicators are off the charts. Something has severely agitated his system. It was Grace who made the connection first. Her unique memory for sound patterns and emotional responses told her exactly what was happening. The arguing, she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the alarms. He can hear us. All the anger and shouting, it's frightening him. Without waiting for permission, Grace moved to Jamie's bedside and began to sing, not the gentle humming she usually did, but her full voice, clear and strong, singing the lullaby that had become their special song. Golden slumbers kiss your eyes, smiles await you when you rise. Sleep, pretty baby, do not cry, and I will sing a lullaby. The effect was immediate and miraculous. Jamie's vital signs began to stabilize, his heart rate dropping to normal levels, his brain activity showing the peaceful patterns that had become associated with Grace's presence. But this time, something even more extraordinary happened. For the first time in 4 months, Jamie Sterling moved. His fingers twitched, then curled slightly. His eyelids fluttered. And then, incredibly, his lips moved as if trying to form words. Dr. Foster was monitoring everything, her eyes wide with amazement. Keep singing, she whispered urgently. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. Grace continued her lullaby, tears streaming down her face as she watched Jamie fighting his way back to consciousness. Everyone in the room held their breath, witnessing what could only be described as a miracle unfolding before their eyes. And then Jamie opened his eyes. His gaze was unfocused at first, confused, as if he was trying to remember where he was and what had happened to him. But gradually, his eyes found Grace's face, and with a voice weak from months of silence, he spoke his first words. Grace, don't stop singing. The silence that followed was profound. Jamie had awakened not calling for his father, not asking for his mother, but asking for the humble cleaning woman who had sung to him through the darkest nights of his young life. It was a moment that redefined everything everyone in that room thought they knew about healing, about human connection, about the power of simple acts of love. Robert Sterling dropped to his knees beside his son's bed, tears streaming down his face as he took Jamie's hand. Son. Oh God, Jamie, you're awake. You're really awake. Jamie turned his head slowly toward his father, his expression confused but aware. Daddy? Where's Mommy? The question hung in the air, a reminder of the loss that had started this entire journey. But instead of the crushing despair he had felt for 2 years whenever Jamie might have asked about Catherine, Robert found himself able to answer with love and honesty. Mommy's in heaven, son. But she's been watching over you, and she sent Grace to take care of you while you were sleeping. Jamie looked back at Grace, who was still humming softly, her presence providing the comfort and stability he needed as he navigated his return to the waking world. "She sang to me every night," he said weakly. "I heard her. Even when everything was dark, I heard her singing." Dr. Blake stood frozen at the edge of the room, witnessing the complete collapse of his worldview. The unnecessary employee he had been about to fire had just facilitated what appeared to be a miraculous recovery. The unprofessional activities he had been so eager to stop had proven to be the key to reaching a child who had been lost in the darkness of trauma. The hospital room that had been a place of vigil and despair was transformed in an instant into something resembling a celebration. Dr. Foster was immediately on her radio, calling for additional specialists to assess Jamie's condition and document his remarkable recovery. Nurses were checking and rechecking his vital signs, all of which showed not just stability, but improvement beyond anything they had recorded during his entire 4-month stay. But the most profound transformation was taking place in the relationships between the people who had been brought together by Jamie's crisis. Robert Sterling, the man who had become bitter and controlling in his grief, was experiencing something he thought he might never feel again: gratitude that wasn't mixed with anger, hope that wasn't tempered by despair, and love that wasn't shadowed by loss. "Grace," Robert said, standing slowly and facing the woman who had given him back his son, "I owe you an apology that I don't even know how to begin." Grace, still overwhelmed by Jamie's awakening, shook her head gently. "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Sterling. I just did what felt right." "No," Robert insisted, his voice carrying a humility that hadn't been there before. "I treated you like you were invisible. I saw you as just another hospital employee, not as the extraordinary person who was caring for my son when I had forgotten how to do it myself. I was so caught up in my own pain that I couldn't see the miracle happening right in front of me." Dr. Foster, having completed her initial assessment of Jamie, turned to address the group. Her scientific mind was struggling to process what she had witnessed, but her experience as a physician told her she was seeing something genuinely remarkable. "I've been practicing neurology for over 30 years, she said, "and I've never seen a recovery quite like this." Jamie's brain scans from this morning showed no indication that consciousness was imminent. What we've just witnessed suggests that there are aspects of coma recovery that we don't fully understand, particularly the role of auditory stimulation and emotional connection. She turned to Grace with newfound respect. "Ms. Williams, I would very much like to document your methods and explore the possibility of incorporating music therapy more formally into our treatment protocols. What you've accomplished here could potentially help countless other patients." Grace was quiet for a moment, processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. Her simple acts of kindness, her grandmother's lullabies, her belief in the healing power of love, all of it had been validated in the most dramatic way possible. But true to her character, her first thoughts weren't of recognition or reward. "Will Jamie be okay?" she asked. "Will he recover completely?" Dr. Foster smiled, the first genuinely warm smile she had shown in months. "It's early, but his responses are excellent. With proper rehabilitation and continued support, I'm very optimistic about his full recovery." It was then that Jamie, who had been listening quietly to the adults discussing his condition, spoke up with a clarity that sometimes comes to children in moments of perfect honesty. "Dr. Blake was mean to Grace. She was just trying to help me." Every eye in the room turned to Dr. Blake, who stood near the doorway looking like a man watching his career crumble in real time. The child's simple statement had crystallized everything wrong with his approach to hospital administration. He had prioritized rules over compassion, efficiency over human dignity, cost savings over patient care. Robert Sterling, his protective instincts now extended beyond his own family to include those who had cared for them, addressed Dr. Blake directly. "I think it's time for you to leave. And I think it's time for this hospital's board to have a serious discussion about leadership priorities." Dr. Blake, recognizing that his position was now completely untenable, attempted one final face-saving measure. "Mr. Sterling, perhaps I was hasty in my assessment. We could certainly review Ms. Williams' situation and—" "No," Robert said firmly. "You revealed exactly who you are tonight, Dr. Blake. You showed us that you see compassionate care as a liability and human dignity as an operational inefficiency. This hospital, and the people it serves, deserve better." As Dr. Blake left the room, his career in ruins, Grace found herself in a position she had never imagined, being celebrated and valued for the very qualities that had previously made her invisible. But her focus remained, as always, on others. "Mr. Sterling," she said carefully, "I hope you'll continue to sing to Jamie during the day. Music was always important to him, wasn't it? Robert nodded, remembering how Jamie and Catherine used to play piano together, filling their home with melodies that had gone silent after the accident. Yes, he loved music. His mother taught him to play piano. I stopped all of that after she died. I couldn't bear to hear it. Grace's eyes filled with understanding. Maybe now you can start again. Music isn't just sound, Mr. Sterling. It's memory, love, connection. When we sing the songs someone we love taught us, we keep them alive in a different way. Dr. Foster, who had been quietly observing this transformation, stepped forward with a proposal that would change everything for Grace. Ms. Williams, I'd like to offer you a position as our hospital's first director of music therapy. It would involve working with patients across all departments, training staff in therapeutic music techniques, and developing protocols based on what you've learned through your intuitive approach to healing. Grace was speechless. The idea that her humble service could become a formal profession, that her grandmother's lullabies could become medical treatment, was almost too much to comprehend. I don't have any formal training in music or therapy. You have something better, Dr. Foster replied. You have wisdom, compassion, and a proven track record. We can provide the formal training. What we can't teach is the heart you bring to this work. Robert Sterling, witnessing Grace's hesitation and understanding the financial pressures that drove her life choices, made a decision that would ensure Jamie's guardian angel could continue her work without worry. Grace, if you accept Dr. Foster's offer, I'd like to establish a fund to cover your mother's care. No one who saved my son should have to choose between their calling and their family responsibilities. The generosity of the offer overwhelmed Grace, but it was Jamie who provided the final persuasion. Grace, the boy said softly, will you keep singing? Not just to me, but to other kids who are scared and lonely. Looking into the eyes of the child whose recovery had become a testament to the power of love and music, Grace knew her answer. Yes, Jamie. I'll keep singing. Over the following weeks, as Jamie continued his remarkable recovery, the changes at Manhattan General Hospital rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. Grace's music therapy program began with Jamie as its first official patient, but quickly expanded to other departments as word of its effectiveness spread. Dr. Foster documented everything meticulously, creating case studies that would later be published in medical journals and inspire similar programs at hospitals around the world. But she never forgot the humble night shift cleaner whose instinctive compassion had taught her more about healing than decades of medical training. Robert Sterling's transformation was perhaps the most dramatic of all. The cold, demanding man who had treated hospital staff like servants became an advocate for worker dignity and holistic patient care. He funded not just Grace's program, but initiatives throughout the hospital that recognized the vital role of every employee in the healing process. Most importantly, Robert rediscovered his relationship with his son. They began playing piano together again, with Grace sometimes joining them for impromptu concerts in Jamie's room. The music that had been silenced by grief was restored, stronger and more beautiful for having survived loss and found its way back to joy. The hospital's board, impressed by the positive publicity and measurable patient outcomes from Grace's program, voted unanimously to remove Dr. Blake from his position and implement new policies that prioritized compassionate care alongside operational efficiency. The case became a model for healthcare administration programs nationwide. Leave a comment below telling us about a time when someone's simple act of kindness changed your life in ways they probably never realized. 6 months after Jamie's miraculous awakening, Manhattan General Hospital had become a different place entirely. The sterile corridors now regularly echoed with carefully administered music therapy sessions, and the hospital's satisfaction ratings had reached record highs. But the most profound changes were in the lives of the people whose destinies had intersected in room 312 on that life-changing night. Grace Williams no longer worked the lonely night shift, cleaning in solitude. As the hospital's director of music therapy, she arrived each morning to an office filled with thank-you letters from patients and families, research materials for her expanding program, and a schedule packed with sessions that brought healing through song. Her formal title was impressive, but Grace remained exactly who she had always been, a woman who believed that everyone deserved to be cared for with dignity and love. Her program had grown beyond anyone's expectations. Grace now supervised a team of 5 music therapists, and their work extended throughout the hospital. In the pediatric ward, children facing scary procedures were calmed by gentle lullabies. In the geriatric unit, elderly patients with dementia found moments of clarity when they heard songs from their youth. In the psychiatric ward, music became a bridge to patients who had withdrawn from verbal communication. But Grace's greatest joy came from her continued work with Jamie Sterling, who had not only recovered completely but had become something of a miracle child, inspiring other young patients with his story of recovery and resilience. He was now learning to play piano again, with both his father and Grace as his teachers, and his room had become an informal gathering place where other patients' families came to find hope. Robert Sterling had discovered that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars or properties, but in relationships and the ability to make a positive impact on others' lives. He had restructured his entire company around principles of compassionate leadership and employee dignity. His construction projects now included mandatory wellness centers and childcare facilities, and he had become known throughout New York's business community as an executive who proved that financial success and human kindness weren't mutually exclusive. Most remarkably, Robert had found a way to honor Catherine's memory that brought joy rather than pain. The Catherine Sterling Foundation for Music Therapy now funded similar programs in hospitals across the country, ensuring that Grace's approach to healing would reach thousands of patients who might otherwise never experience the therapeutic power of music administered with love. The relationship between Robert and Grace had evolved into something neither had expected, a deep friendship based on mutual respect and shared commitment to Jamie's well-being. Grace had taught Robert that true strength sometimes meant admitting vulnerability, while Robert had shown Grace that her worth extended far beyond her humble origins. "You know," Robert said one afternoon as they watched Jamie leading a sing-along session with other young patients, "Catherine would have loved you. She always believed that the most important people in any situation were often the ones everyone else overlooked." Grace smiled, watching Jamie's confident, joyful interaction with the other children. She raised an amazing son. And she chose an amazing father for him. "You just forgot for a while who you really were." Dr. Foster had been promoted to Chief of Staff, largely based on her innovative integration of music therapy into standard medical practice. Her research on Grace's methods had been published in the New England Journal of Medicine, bringing international attention to Manhattan General's pioneering approach to patient care. But she never forgot the lesson that Grace had taught her, that sometimes the most profound medical breakthroughs come not from laboratories or research studies, but from the simple human instinct to offer comfort to those who suffer. Jamie Sterling, now 9 years old, had become the unofficial ambassador for music therapy at Manhattan General. His story had been featured in medical journals and news programs, but he remained a humble, sweet child whose brush with death had given him an unusual appreciation for life's simple joys. He particularly loved the moments when Grace would teach him new songs, many of them the same lullabies her grandmother had sung decades ago in a small southern town. "Grace," Jamie asked one day as they practiced a new song together, "do you think my mom can hear us singing?" Grace considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. "I think love never really ends, Jamie. When we sing songs that come from love, when we care for people the way your mom would have wanted them cared for, I think that's a way of keeping her close." Jamie nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Then let's sing extra loud today." Their laughter echoed through the halls of Manhattan General, a sound that had become as much a part of the hospital's healing environment as any medical equipment or pharmaceutical treatment. The night shift at the hospital was now staffed by cleaning crews who had been trained in basic principles of therapeutic interaction. They understood that their work was about more than maintaining cleanliness. They were part of a healing environment where every interaction mattered. Several had asked Grace to teach them simple songs they could hum while working, carrying forward the tradition she had started years ago when she was just a lonely cleaner trying to bring comfort to suffering strangers. Grace's mother, Sarah, had been moved to a beautiful assisted living facility where she received excellent care while Grace worked. On her good days, Sarah would listen to Grace practice new therapeutic songs, sometimes joining in with fragments of melodies from her own childhood. Grace treasured these moments, knowing that music was creating bridges across the gaps that dementia had created in her mother's memory. The story of Room 312 had become legend at Manhattan General. New employees were told about the night shift cleaner whose lullabies awakened a boy from a coma and transformed a hospital's entire approach to patient care. Medical students came to observe Grace's sessions and interview her about her methods, always leaving with the understanding that the most sophisticated medical knowledge meant nothing without compassion and genuine human connection. Dr. Blake had found employment at a large corporate hospital chain where his efficiency-focused approach was more appreciated. But even there, he sometimes found himself remembering the night when a simple cleaning woman had accomplished what all his protocols and procedures could not. The memory haunted him, a reminder of the human cost of treating people as statistics rather than souls deserving of dignity and care. 1 year after Jamie's awakening, Grace received an invitation that brought her full circle. The National Association of Music Therapists wanted her to deliver the keynote address at their annual conference. Standing before an audience of trained professionals, Grace spoke with the same simple honesty that had always characterized her approach to life. "I never set out to be a healer," she told the assembled therapists. "I was just a cleaner who believed that everyone deserves to feel less alone in their darkest moments. I sang because my grandmother taught me that music was medicine, and medicine should be given freely to anyone who needs it. What I learned is that healing isn't something we do to people, it's something we do with them. It's about showing up, being present, and offering whatever gift we have, no matter how small it might seem." The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for Grace's accomplishments, but for the reminder she represented, that the most profound healing often comes not from complex treatments or expensive equipment, but from the simple human decision to care deeply about someone else's suffering. After the conference, Grace returned to New York and to her work at Manhattan General. But she carried with her the knowledge that her story had inspired similar programs across the country. Hospital cleaning crews were being trained in therapeutic interaction. Music therapy programs were incorporating the intuitive, compassionate approach that Grace had pioneered. Medical schools were teaching students about the importance of recognizing and valuing the contributions of every person involved in patient care. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, exactly 18 months after the night that changed everything, Grace found herself back in room 312. It was now used for overflow patients, but she had asked for a few minutes alone there, wanting to reflect on how much had changed since that first night when she had unknowingly begun singing to a dying boy. The room looked exactly the same medical equipment, the same clinical atmosphere, the same view of the city through the window. But Grace knew that something fundamental had shifted in this space. It had become a place where miracles were not only possible but expected, where the power of human connection had proven stronger than medical prognosis, where love had quite literally awakened life from the shadow of death. As she stood there, Grace began to hum, not the lullabies she now taught to other therapists, but a new song, one that seemed to arise spontaneously from her heart. It was a song of gratitude, of wonder, of recognition that she had been privileged to witness and participate in something far greater than herself. The song spoke of ordinary people doing extraordinary things through simple acts of love. It celebrated the mystery of healing that happens when one person decides that another person's pain matters enough to act upon. It honored the transformations that are possible when pride gives way to humility, when judgment gives way to compassion, when despair gives way to hope. Standing in that room where it all began, Grace understood that she had always been exactly where she was meant to be. Her path from night shift cleaner to director of music therapy hadn't been a promotion or a career change, it had been a recognition of who she had always been. She was a healer, a comforter, a voice in the darkness reminding others that they were not alone. The story that began with a simple lullaby had become a symphony, with each person touched by Grace's gift adding their own voice to the melody. Jamie's laughter, Robert's gratitude, Dr. Foster's research, the thank you letters from countless patients and families, all of it was part of a larger composition about the power of human kindness to transform lives in ways that no one could have predicted. As Grace prepared to leave room 312, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Jamie appeared in the doorway, now tall for his age and glowing with health, followed by Robert, who was carrying a small piano keyboard. "We heard you singing," Jamie said with a grin. "Dad thought maybe we could have a concert in here, like old times." Robert smiled, setting up the keyboard near the window. "I figured it was time to fill this room with music again. What do you say, Grace? One more song in room 312. Grace looked at these two people who had become her family, in this room where their lives had intersected in the most unexpected way, and felt a profound sense of completion. They had all been broken in different ways, Jamie by trauma, Robert by grief, Grace by years of invisibility and financial struggle. But in finding each other, in choosing to care for each other despite their differences in background and social status, they had discovered that healing was not just possible but inevitable when approached with genuine love. As Jamie began to play and Grace began to sing, their music floated through the halls of Manhattan General Hospital, reaching patients and families who were facing their own dark nights of fear and uncertainty. The song carried a message that transcended words, that no one suffers alone, that healing comes in many forms, that sometimes the most powerful medicine is simply the knowledge that someone cares enough to stay present with us in our pain. The story of the cleaner who sang a boy back to consciousness had become more than just a medical miracle. It had become a testament to the transformative power of recognizing and honoring the dignity in every human being. It proved that in a world that often values wealth over compassion and status over service, The most profound changes still come from the simple decision to treat each person we encounter as someone worthy of our very best effort at love. And in room 312, as Grace's voice joined with Jamie's piano and Robert's humming, the music they created together was more than entertainment or therapy. It was a celebration of second chances, a hymn of gratitude for unexpected blessings, and a promise that somewhere in the night, whenever someone is afraid and alone, there will always be a voice ready to remind them that they matter, they are seen, and they are loved. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of human kindness. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that miracles still happen. And remember, you never know when your simple act of compassion might be exactly what someone needs to find their way back to hope. What will your song be?